was like drawing me in, and then as soon as you thought the Jedi was going to be shot, you hear a bang of a blaster bolt, and the bad guy fell. Welcome back to another bookish review. Now today I'm going to be talking about the book, The High Republic, Light of the Jedi. Now, I don't have the physical copy of the book to show you like I normally do because this time I listened to the audiobook for it. So I'll leave a copy of the cover in the corner so you know what book I'm talking about. But before we get into the actual story, I would like to talk about the quality of the audiobook itself. This was probably one of the best audiobooks that I've ever listened to. Granted, I'm used to listening to the text-to-speech kind of audiobooks that people put up on YouTube, which get very monotonous and very rarely have any music or anything behind them. The closest second audiobook I've ever listened to is probably Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets that I listened to on Spotify, but even that didn't have the amount of voice acting, voice effects, sound effects, and music that this one had. I remember I was listening to it the other day while I was walking and I had my earbuds in, and there was a part where one of the Jedi was about to be shot, and with the music and the sound effects, it was like drawing me in, and then as soon as you thought the Jedi was going to be shot, you hear a bang of a blaster bolt, and the bad guy fell dead. That made me jump because of how suspenseful the scene was, and all of a sudden that hit of the blaster bolt. And it was a good way to keep you in the story and keep you wrapped. And I loved listening to this audiobook because it was narrated fantastically, the voice acting and voice effects were perfect, the sound effects and the music were great. Now that being said, we're going to get into the actual what I thought about the story now. So if you do not want this story spoiled for you, I recommend you leave now so you don't get it spoiled. Assuming all of those that don't want spoilers are gone, let's get into this. Now, starting off with something that kind of put me off a bit so we can get the bad out of the way and go into the good, is there are so many characters in this book and they all have such different names that I'm used to. So if I don't remember a character's name, please bear with me because I am not good with names whatsoever. I never have been. So if I can't remember a character's name, I apologize. But I do not like a lot of characters in books because it kind of breaks my immersion every time we switch perspectives or switch characters, because you constantly have to stop, take a second to reorient yourself in that character's mindset, their abilities, their like the way they act, the way they move, the way they talk. You have to orient yourself back into that character as you're reading, which slows down and takes you out of the story. At least listening to it, it helps because each character was voiced different, so you got an easier feel of sliding back into that character when they came back into the story. That was one point where listening to the audiobook for this really did help, because I feel like if I was reading this story straight from the book, that I would have put it aside and said, no, it's not for me, because there are so many characters in this book. And because there are so many characters that we're following, there's also a lot of jumping around in the story and a lot of, okay, now we're following this character and this is happening, and oh, we're following this character now and now this is happening. I cannot stand that in a story. I like following one character or two characters at the most and being like, these are our characters we're following. Don't give me 4, 5, 6, 7 characters or you're gonna turn me off real quick to the story. But the audiobook saved this story for me and helped me to enjoy it. But this was a book that I was recommended by a friend, so I wanted to give it a listen. Anyway, the story starts out in a peaceful time during the Republic in the Hetzal region in the Outer Rim, and we see a pilot flying a ship called the Legacy Run to take supplies and people through the system to Hetzal's different moons and to its main planet. And it's just like a farming planet. But something catastrophic happens. The Legacy Run is torn to shreds in an instant in hyperspace. Because of this out-of-nowhere disaster, the Jedi are brought in to investigate. You have Avar Kriss, Loden Greatstorm, Bel Zenithar, a few more. Like I said, there are a lot of characters, and I'm not good with names, but those are like the main ones that they focus on, are called in to investigate what happened with the Legacy Run. With the Legacy Run disaster, they find out that a group of marauders called the Nihil are responsible. And every time the Nihil talk at first, they remind me of this bounty hunter from the Clone Wars. But the Nihil are just a bunch of marauders. So everybody's like, why would a bunch of marauders suddenly turn terrorist and start attacking the hyperspace lanes? And how are they even doing this? Because it seems impossible. Well, it turns out that the leader of the Nihil, Marchion Ro, has a woman who can predict or create or control little shortcuts through hyperspace or emergencies. And he uses her as a map to plot his way through hyperspace to continue these attacks. Marchion as a villain, at first he didn't really scare me, especially when he goes around beating up on his own men or killing them. I'm like, that is such a tired villain trope. You think that you would need as many people on your team as possible because you're already outnumbered by the good guys. Why would you intentionally incapacitate or kill your own men? It's so dumb, it's so overused, it's just, that trope doesn't scare me anymore. Because you know it's gonna happen with every single villain that is brought up on screen. The moment where it cements him as a villain in my book is such a simple line, and he has one of the Jedi held captive toward the end of the book, and he says, I was taught you don't capture a Jedi with bars, you capture a Jedi with pain. And something about that line made my blood go cold. He wasn't even talking about pain to the Jedi, he was just talking about causing people pain, anyone possible, and anyone he can get his hands on, just to keep the Jedi contained. That's the moment for me where it cemented him as the villain. I love it when you love to hate a villain. There's a very fine line between actually hating the villain and just wanting nothing to do with them and not caring about their story. Then there is loving a villain, loving to follow their story, but hating them because of the shit that they do. They pull that off very well in this book. The Jedi soon figure out that this is what's happening, is that there is this group responsible for these attacks, and it's not random. We find out that the Nihil were after this group of high-ranking family members that are living as farmers because they want to ransom them off for money. At least that's what we thought it was about at first, until the whole tables get turned and it's truly revealed what Marchion really wanted. And I'm not going to tell you what he really wanted because I'm trying to avoid super major spoilers in case there are some of you that are watching this video to become interested in the story. I don't want to ruin that for you, but I'm trying to get my thoughts of this book out without spoiling it and by giving you enough context. Now, in terms of story, it was well handled, even with all the perspective changes and character switches. It was really well written, and there was even some cussing in there, which surprised me for it being a Star Wars franchise. My two favorite characters in this were probably Avar Kriss and Bel Zenithar, and it's because Avar has this really strong, really interesting connection with the Force, where it's she hears the song of the Force and she seems more connected with it than a lot of Jedi. I would say she seems almost like Yoda with her connection to the Force. I mean, no one's near as strong as Yoda, but her ability with the Force is genuinely interesting and it makes her a compelling character. And then you have Bel Zenithar, who's the only Padawan of the group. Or if you don't know what Padawan is, it's a student, a Jedi student. But he's the only Jedi student of the group, so he's still learning the ropes as he is on this mission with his master, Loden. And he's still learning the ropes as a Jedi. So he's still trying to keep up. And their relationship as master and Padawan is so funny to me. All in all, I think that the characters were great, their relationships were good, the fighting was great, the sound effects, the voice acting, the voice effects, the music all elevated the story. And even listening to it, I was able to picture the story in my head. I think that everyone involved with this story did a fantastic job. Like I said, my only complaint about this story was the fact that there were so many characters and so many perspective switches. But that's nothing new for me. But I highly recommend this story because it's a great read, and the audiobook is fantastic as well, so I recommend that as well, especially if you don't want to go get the physical copy. This is a good story, and I'm glad it was recommended to me. So, hope to see you next time.